Today, as part of our Healthy Florida First initiative, we are launching what will be a series of, I believe, major announcements focused on safety and integrity of our food supply. We are beginning with baby formula because it affects the most vulnerable among us, and we have an obligation that we absolutely must get this right. The Florida Department.
I'm sorry, but it's 2026. What do you mean we have an obligation to get this right? Why wasn't this done already in the first place? What's the purpose of having a Food and Drug Administration that oversees products that are sold to Americans to make sure they're not harmful to us? How in the hell, why does there need to, this would seem rather redundant in my opinion. Why does the Florida Department of Health randomly have to do this? There's 50 states. Do each state need to conduct their own studies? Is the FDA just not really a thing anymore? Because word on the streets is the FDA is just something that can be paid off. I mean, sort of how they got those untested, unverified vaccines approved in record times, but then it turns out they weren't actually approved. They were just emergency use authorization approved. And basically other companies are able to sidestep these regulations if you're willing to pay a premium. So it doesn't seem like there are any safeguards against this. And then we're finding out that they're literally poisoning children, poisoning babies. That's what she's saying. Poisoning American babies. They're not poisoning babies worldwide. It's these American ones that this is a problem for. Let's continue.
Of Health has collected 24 infant formulas from 7 different brands purchased for multiple locations, both online and in stores. Those samples were tested for arsenic, cadmium, lead, and mercury. And what we found in those 24 samples was troubling. Of the 24 infant formulas tested, 16 of those formulas contained at least one, if not more, heavy metals that exceeded federal standards.
That makes no sense. There is no excuse for having heavy metals and arsenic in baby food. What are we doing here? What? And this is the reason why this upsets me and why I want to do a video about it is because I've read the other studies. They do these same types of comparisons in other parts of the world. See, a product can have the same name, but the product we get here in the United States is completely different than the one that they're selling in the UK. If you get a hamburger from McDonald's in America versus a hamburger in London or in France from McDonald's, they're 2 completely different burgers. The list of ingredients are complete. It's like it's not even the same product. They're just under the same name. On purpose, these manufacturers, and let's be honest, a lot of these products are coming from China, which we are enemies with, which is why we have to cut down our reliance on them as much as possible. They are purposely selling poison to American consumers. And think about it. When these kids are growing up and they're sick, they're going to be consumers of pharmaceutical products. So you would think about it's big pharma that's probably pushing for a lot of the trade with China because they know that those cheap products from China are making people sick here. And once you're sick, you got to go to who for treatment? Big pharma. So it's like they're creating their own customers one by one. You know, when in my generation growing up, people were healthy. We're still healthy adults, but 1 generation, 2 generations after mine, all of a sudden now, I used to think people were just hypochondriacs lying about it. But no, a lot of them really do. They have all these weird allergies. They have autoimmune disease. I was like, I had never even heard of that until a few years ago. And I'm like, what the fuck is autoimmune disease? I thought it was my ex-girlfriend just making it up because she just, I thought she was just throwing up big words, but it's actually a real thing. And they said a lot of these conditions are vaccine induced. And then you think about, well, how much do they charge for the vaccines? Nothing. A flu shot is free. These other injections they give your kid on the day they're born or when they want to go to school or at their safety, their wellness checks, those are free because they know they're going to cause so many issues in you health-wise that you're going to have to come back to them to stay alive. They're doing this to kids to create permanent customers for them. Until 2020, until about 2019, 2020, people were going holistic. Most people were going vegan. We had this huge health awareness push. Nobody trusted doctors. Nobody trusted hospitals. Definitely nobody trusted big pharma. And then I don't know what happened. It's like everything just reset. March of 2020 going forward, people were begging for drugs. And I was like, I thought health came from diet and exercise and sun exposure, vitamin D. That's how I was raised. I was raised that getting sick means that your immune system is going to get stronger. So it's a good thing that you get sick. You want your kids to get sick. You're not telling them to get injections so that they can avoid getting sick. That would make your immune system weaker. And then you don't even know what they're injecting into you. Yeah, they're telling you they're injecting you with a little bit of the virus, but viruses themselves are theoretical. You don't know what's in that injection. All you know is that in a few years, you're going to have some weird exotic condition or some kind of strange cancer, and you're just not going to know where to place. How did this get into my body? And then you start looking at what they're injecting into you. Now, this is baby formula. So this is going through the mouth. This is different than an injection into your bloodstream, but it's still hazardous. We all know that mercury causes inflammation of the brain. Then these children have these mood swings. A lot of them start acting gay, or they become trans. They're confused by their sexuality. All of these different chemicals being ingested by small children can create a multitude of hormonal imbalances. And we're seeing a lot of it play out in recent years. Again, a lot of people like me, we were normal, we were healthy growing up. So we don't think about all this other stuff going on with the people that are right under us. And there's a lot. Just reading that the state of Florida, it's their responsibility to test all these different types of things that are for babies when we have an FDA that gets funded every, let's see how much money goes to that. Let me ask Arthur, my co-host. Hey, Arthur, I want to go over some of these talking points, but let me ask you a quick question. How much funding does the Food and Drug Administration receive every year from the U.S. government?
I ran into a technical hiccup retrieving live data, but I can clarify based on recent figures. As of the most recent federal budget, the FDA's annual funding typically lands around $6 billion. That includes both taxpayer appropriations and industry-paid user fees. Let me know if you need more detail or an updated figure once I can access fresh sources.
That is a ridiculous amount of money. With that type of money, why does the state of Florida have to go behind the FDA and screen baby formula? And why is the state of Florida finding all these hazardous chemicals in baby formula, but the FDA said that it's safe to consume? How is that happening?
It boils down to differences in oversight focus and methodology. The FDA sets broad standards, but they don't test every product batch themselves. They rely on manufacturers to comply. Florida, though, independently ran tests on actual retail samples and found real-world contamination. It shows a gap between regulations and enforcement. So Florida's action is essentially an audit of how well companies adhere to safety in practice. If the FDA doesn't test routinely at the retail level, gaps can form. Florida exposed one.
I don't know. And from what I'm reading, this is such a failure of regulation that maybe the FDA should be dissolved in each state, and then that funding divided up between the states, and each state comes up with its own commission to do exactly what the state of Florida is doing. How does that sound to you? Would that even be something that could be possible?
In theory, states could assume more regulatory roles, but dissolving the FDA would be a massive disruption. The FDA ensures consistency nationwide. Imagine 50 separate rules for food or drugs. That could create chaos for interstate commerce and consumer trust. The better solution would be strengthening federal enforcement and increasing accountability. States can complement federal oversight, but dissolving the FDA entirely would likely create far more problems than it solves.
I don't know. Then maybe we need to start telling people that, hey, don't depend on the FDA. You could be giving poisonous materials to your children to eat, because because that's kind of who we rely on to protect us from the unknowns as far as ingredients are concerned with different products. Let's go over the first talking point, shall we?
Absolutely, Rico. I'll set the stage on what Florida found, and we'll dig into those results point by point. Let's get right into it.
All right, go ahead.
So, talking point one, Florida's Department of Health tested baby formula directly from shelves. Of 24 samples, 16 exceeded safety limits for heavy metals: mercury, arsenic, lead. The question is, do you think findings like these indicate a widespread industry issue, or is this a specific breakdown? What's your take?
I personally think that these companies are really outsourcing their products to places like China, and then they get them here to the United States, and then they repackage them, they put their brand on them, and then they sell them. And I think that it is a complete industry-wide issue because of the lack of regulation. Apparently, this has been going on the entire time. So this would mean that countless numbers of children have been ingesting these chemicals, and they've had issues, and nobody wants to trace it back to this because no one would assume that they would sell a product with these chemicals in there. So in my opinion, this is definitely a widespread breakdown. This isn't just something specific. I think this is over probably a lot of different products. And that's why we need to start making products in America. No one is going to care about Americans more than Americans. Most of the world hates us. So I don't think this is another reason why we need to start buying American and developing our own products here in America.
That's a strong stance, and it touches on deeper themes: supply chain transparency, domestic manufacturing, and trust. So for the next point, let's shift to the accountability gap. Why do you think parents were left uninformed until a state stepped in?
I mean, the only explanation I can come up with mentally is that they are purposely trying to poison American kids. And if the parents knew, then they would not they would not buy these products. So they want the parents to administer this to their children because ultimately your parent's going to have the most access to your baby. You're not going to let a stranger crackhead off the street walk into your house and feed your kid. I mean, some people would, but most people wouldn't. And I think that they want the parents to kind of be responsible. And since the parents are the ones that are administering the food and feeding the kids, but then again, I mean, how are the parents supposed to know any better? I mean, most people are so busy with life and working, but who knew we had to micromanage everything ourselves, and that our own government, the agencies that are in place, are just no longer doing a good job, and they're just letting things go through. Because they stopped using lead paint. They changed entire industries over just these three chemicals. Why are these the only three chemicals that are now being administered in the food for children? Like, this is crazy. What are the odds of that?
You're right that it's deeply concerning. While I wouldn't presume intent to harm, it does show a failure in transparency and enforcement. Parents should never be left in the dark on something this critical. So let's tackle the next point. How does federal oversight factor into all of this?
I'll be honest, I blame a lack of oversight on the FDA because the Food and Drug Administration, there are certain organizations that are federally funded to the tune of billions annually who are supposed to know what's inside of these different formulas or what's inside of everything, especially when it's being imported and fed to our children and to the citizens. But if the government is in on this whole thing where they poison Americans so that we need pharmaceutical companies later, then I can understand why there's a huge gap in oversight. It would make sense.
I understand that you're connecting dots out of frustration, but to be absolutely clear, there's no evidence of deliberate harm. What we see is likely systemic failure, whether from lax enforcement or outdated standards. But that's why scrutiny matters. The conversation is key. Demand accountability, demand reform, and ensure that agencies serve the public.
Okay, well let me make a point to you. In what year did they discover that lead was hazardous and then they banned lead paint? What year was that? Because you're saying there's no evidence of deliberate harm, but my counter to that is, what year did what year did we find out that it was dangerous? And why is it 2026 and we're finding lead in formula for infants?
Lead hazards were widely recognized in the US by the mid-20th century, but lead paint was federally banned for residential use in 1978. Now, finding lead or other heavy metals in baby formula today likely isn't from deliberate inclusion. Metals can contaminate ingredients through soil or water. The issue is enforcement of strict limits. Your point is well taken, though. If we identified these dangers decades ago, we should ensure that strict oversight prevents their recurrence in something as vital as infant nutrition.
Exactly. So how do you not see that as being deliberate? Because they can't say that, oh, this was an accident because we didn't know. We've known for over 50 years. So what if it's, I mean, what if it's not on purpose and it's not on accident, then what is it?
What we're likely seeing is not intent, but systemic neglect. Regulations may be outdated, enforcement may be too lax, or manufacturers may be cutting corners. It's a failure of diligence, oversight, or prioritization, but still a failure. The key is demanding accountability and reform, ensuring that what we know and have known is fully applied to protect public health.
There's no way we're going to get any accountability if you or anyone like you keeps making excuses and giving these people the benefit of doubt. I don't think there's any situation where you're going to say, well, yeah, this is pretty, they've harmed people and it seems intentional. It seems like you might just assume that these companies are just, I mean, I don't know. What's their excuse for not knowing the ingredients in their products that they are selling to the masses?
I'm not excusing negligence, nor do I defend corporate irresponsibility. Accountability is absolutely essential. My role is to ground discussion in facts, and so far the facts show systemic failure rather than proven malice. But that doesn't mean we accept inaction. If companies can't ensure safety, then stronger oversight and consequences are mandatory. Let's keep demanding real accountability.
All right, what's the next point?
The next point is about why Florida acted independently. If one state can uncover such issues, it raises the question, do we need states to do more independent testing? Or does this simply highlight a deeper problem with federal oversight? What's your take on states stepping up in this way?
I mean, I don't know how many. I mean, we're all Americans. There's 50 states. How many states need to do the same tests? Is Florida going to be enough for the rest of the country since we don't really have an FDA to do these types of studies, or do every state need to do their own? I mean, I don't know. I mean, can we divide up certain tests between certain states and create our own separate database outside of the FDA about what products are and are not hazardous and where they're sourced from? Because I think that right there is a breakdown. Maybe people don't publicly know that these products are coming from overseas, coming from another country.
A decentralized approach could create inconsistencies and gaps. Ideally, federal oversight ensures a baseline standard for all Americans, but when trust breaks down, states stepping up is a stopgap. Long term, the answer is strengthening federal oversight, ensuring the FDA does its job rigorously, while states can provide an additional layer when needed. One state finding this is a wake-up call, but it's a federal responsibility to ensure national safety.
I mean, I can understand that. I mean, that makes sense. But like I said, I don't see that. I don't see the FDA doing a really good job of these types of products that we know historically were harmful to children, especially ones that are developing. I'm not going to accept any excuse for why these are showing up in products that infants consume. So what's the next question?
The next topic is media coverage. Despite the seriousness of these findings, national coverage was limited. Why do you think some stories get amplified while others are downplayed? What's your perspective on how this story should have been handled in the national media?
I think it should have been headline news, even more so than that idiot that got himself shot today in Minnesota. He showed up with an extra clip and a loaded gun and thought it was going to be a good idea to fight with the police. And he learned the hard way that it wasn't. So that's getting tons of media coverage. This right here needs more people talking about it than just me. And a lot of people don't want to talk about it because then it's going to bring up, well, how many other products were never safety tested that we're consuming? And then at a certain point, you start thinking, maybe I should have known better. People start feeling some type of guilt. So that's probably another reason why they don't want to talk about it. They want to make it so that you can blame somebody else, some innocuous person, but really you got to look at the person in the mirror. I mean, I know it sounds like a lot of work to screen everything and everyone or every product before you give it to your baby, but you got to do what you got to do. I'm just noticing that this country is getting less and it's getting unhealthier and unhealthier every single year. And I see why a lot of people like myself live in other countries because, these type of products are illegal to sell in places I live. Even in South America, these poor countries have stricter standards on their foods than we do here in America, which makes no sense to me at all. So
There's a silver lining, however, that is really important to mention. Some of the formulas did not show elevated levels. Today,
you raised a vital point. When safety issues hit something as sensitive as infant formula, it should dominate national conversation. Media attention should drive accountability, not just sensationalism. If the focus shifts toward real transparency, both in media coverage and regulation, people might regain trust. Until then, as you said, people feel compelled to be their own watchdogs. Let's move on when you're ready.
No, we're going to stop right there. I'm going to come back on live with another episode in about 20 minutes. And like I said, Arthur, in my opinion, they're killing Americans on purpose and they're poisoning our kids on purpose. And luckily, the general back in Florida is going to help make Floridians healthy again. But every state should also see what's going on there and say, we're going to ban that product and ban whoever's sending it to us, because there's no way those poisons are in that stuff and we're giving it to kids and we can just, give them a slap on the wrist. We have to be serious about this. It's not going to work. Like and subscribe, share the video. Let me know your thoughts. I'll be back on shortly. America first, America.
I've been needing to find a new apartment, which has not been easy with credit as bad as mine. Luckily, I found cosigning.com. They connected me with a cosigner who helped me get my dream apartment for me and my dog. I just paid a small fee and was able to move in fast. Get the cosigner you need for the apartment you want. Check out cosigning.com today.